So today we're going to hear from submitters on the draft local alcohol policy. After the final submitters today, staff will be invited back to the table to answer any questions that we may have that occurred during the meeting. And if councillors have any questions that staff can't answer today, Natasha will collate these and staff will return on the 19th to discuss when we reconvene to continue our deliberations. Staff will do a presentation on the thematic analysis and discuss what the final policy could look like at the commencement of the meeting on the 19th. Ideally, we will close the meeting on the 19th with enough guidance provided for staff so they are able to bring a decision report to a future council meeting for us to consider. Right, so before we start hearing from submitters this morning, we'd like to welcome staff Thomas Lee and Amy Martin, who will briefly introduce the process so far.
I'll just run through to start with a little bit of a reminder of everything we've got here. So
dear,
refresh those memories. Yes. So you'll remember that in June 2024, you agreed that staff could commence work on an LAP. Between July and January 2025, July 2024 and January 2025, staff undertook a significant body of work to develop the research report that you've all had, which included a series of questions for the Community in Our Life in Christchurch series, the Issues and Options paper, which came to you earlier in the year, and undertook initial conversations with a number of key stakeholders. In February and March, we undertook early engagement, which together with previous work informed the development of the draft policy for consultation that we'll be talking about today. Today you're going to hear from some of the submitters who provided feedback on the draft policy, and we'll be back for another briefing next week that will cover what we heard from submitters across the board, and we'll be looking for your direction on the final policy. Bit of a reminder of what we consulted on. So up on the screen, you can see the three policies. Policy 1 addresses the maximum trading hours, proposing a reduction in the maximum trading hours to 9 p.m. for all off licences in the district. Policy 2 proposes a freeze to all new off licences in areas with a deprivation decile score of 8 to 10. And policy 3 is a little more complicated. It proposes to restrict new bottle stores within 200 metres of primary and secondary schools and addiction and rehabilitation centres across most of the district. You'll remember that we consulted on slightly different settings for the Central City and Banks Peninsula. So in the Central City, the proposed settings are no new bottle stores within 50 metres of schools or 100 metres of addiction and rehabilitation facilities, with an exemption for the Central City zone. For Banks Peninsula, the proposed setting is 50 metres from both schools and addiction and rehab facilities. Getting into the consultation, we're out consultation on the draft LAP for 4 weeks, which began on the 17th of April, so just before Easter. During this time, the Let's Talk page for the consultation was viewed 2,790 times. Emails were sent to around 7,300 people, which included key stakeholders, inviting them to provide feedback on the draft policy, and staff also held one webinar and attended 2 community. So in total, we received 415 submissions on the policy. Just a note there, you may have seen 415. There was one that was late, which hasn't been included in the reporting numbers just because it appeared beyond that reporting timeline. And 366 of the submissions received were from individuals throughout the city. We heard from 5 of our community boards and 49 organisations. And 40 submitters told us that they hold a liquor licence, and that includes both on and off licences. As I said before, today you'll hear from some of these submitters, and the full summary of feedback will be available in the consultation report, which we're currently preparing and should be with you next week, ahead of the workshop on the 19th. That's what we've heard. Sorry, one more. So this is just a very brief intro. You'll get more on this next week. But overall, we received a range of feedback on all three of those policies that we consulted on, and we heard from the strongly for, the strongly against, and the people in between. Submitters have diverse and often passionate views on the impact that alcohol has on our communities and the most appropriate way to address those impacts. We heard that most submitters are concerned about the impacts that alcohol has on their community and the ease with which alcohol can be accessed in the city currently. In many instances, they also express concerns about the disproportionate impact that it has on vulnerable communities and vulnerable members of our communities. Generally, most submitters expressed a desire for a proportionate and effective approach to addressing alcohol-related harm in Christchurch and Banks Peninsula, which largely reflects what we heard during that pre-engagement, which then formed the development of the policy. As I mentioned earlier, you'll hear more about the detailed feedback that we received next week during the briefing on the 19th. That's us. Any questions?
Okay, so we can take a couple of questions on that and some more.
Thank you. Just in case there's something I'm just really keen to understand is if Waimakariri intend to do the same thing as what we're doing with the policy.
No, so Waimakariri have an LAP in place with slightly different settings, for instance. So they have 5 to 10 PM closing time work, say 9 PM. Yeah, and Selwyn also on the other side. Their current LAP is 9 PM, but they it's under review. I think perhaps even going back to their council this month as well to discuss.
But as far as I can see, Waimaka only they're doing a alcohol control bylaw just about drinking in public, but I can't see anything about them reviewing their local alcohol policy. No, would you say only happened a few years ago? So as a result of the law change, you're not aware of them reviewing it any time soon.
No, not really aware of it.
Thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Just to be clear, if we do end up going down the track of 9 PM closing for retail outfits, that will not affect those people who order alcohol online. There's no way we can actually stop that occurring after 9 PM.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the LAP can't deal with the remote sales. So like online sales, that sort of thing, that can happen the sale can happen at any time of day.
Councillor Moore.
So just to clarify, so someone, if we brought in 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10, someone would still be able to Uber Eats from Bottle Store in Kaikoura, or is that the general gist of what you're saying?
Yeah, so it's quite complicated, but yeah, so
there'll be nothing prohibiting it as far as bylaws go.
That's right. Yeah, so the LAP, there is a part of the Act that says that for remote sales that it won't apply to the reduction in hours, won't apply to remote sales.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
They still would have to deliver that before mailing.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is really more, we're talking more about the process with things from how we not really.
But that totally impacts the questions I would ask for any submitters to land on a good policy.
What's the tension?
We're doing it a current demand.
It's very hard to get, so we've asked and haven't received in a lot of cases that data. I'm not usually very willing to share it.
Just since the questions are this way, even though it's not really processed, if we passed an LAP that did say limit to 9 o'clock for off licenses, and through advocacy through local government and other groups who are trying to advocate to central government for a law change, if then the law changed to mean the Uber style ones were captured by that, then we would have something in place already. We wouldn't have, we would just be ready to go, rather than having to start a whole new process again at expense and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we can always review the LAP at any time once it's in place.
Yeah.
So if new laws came into effect, we could always make those tweaks.
Incorporate them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also if there were unintended consequences from that. Councillor Scandra, and then you've got Jake online.
Thank you. It's a legal question. I don't think we answered now, but the difference between Banks Peninsula and the central city and the rest of the city. So the principle of what's trying to be achieved through the policy is the same, but suddenly we've got different distances because of whatever Would we be open to a legal challenge for someone in the areas that are not Banks Peninsula or Central City? So if legal could ask that question, that would be good, because the principle of the policy is exactly the same right across, but suddenly we've got different distances for a non-policy achieve. Yeah, if you
I mean, we can get legal to come back on that, but the Act does allow different settings for different parts of the district. So yeah.